Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the Jobcast. Hope your day's going well. I'm excited to introduce our presenter today, Taylor Meadows. Taylor is a recruitment evangelist at Indeed, where he consults with national employers, helping them improve recruitment strategies through data, insights, and trends. And that's me, Don Nguyen. I'm an account executive based in California, focused on helping employers with their hiring needs. On the side, I'm a job guide volunteer where I get to help job seekers like you find your next role. With that, take it away, Taylor.
Hey everyone, it is so good to be with you today. Thanks for having me. Delighted to bring this content to you. We know that moving into the world of virtual hiring has been a big shift. So we've really gone out of our way to make sure that we've compiled tips and tricks to make sure that you feel as confident as possible when you go into your interview. So Don, thank you for the introduction. Yes, my technical title at Indeed is an evangelist. Typically, I work with employers to educate them on how to be as accessible to you as the job seeker on Indeed. But today, I'm going to kind of reveal what some of those back end secrets are so that you feel more confident in your conversation. If you like what you see today, and if you want to continue to follow along, you can find Indeed on Instagram at Indeed Works, or you can find me personally on Instagram at Tailor Presents, and we can discuss all this content at a later date if you have any questions from it. But with that being said, let's go ahead and dive in. So got a lot of information for you today, but this is what you can expect to learn. So first, I'm going to walk you through how to prepare for a virtual interview. There's a couple of nuances that are a little bit different than on-site, so I just want to make sure that you're aware of all of them. We're going to look at video interview best practices, understanding that you're going to be using a couple of different platforms to engage with recruiters, as well as what to do when things don't go as planned, because we've all been in that situation and technology is awesome until it's not. So I'll walk you through that. And then lastly, we're going to go over to how to follow up after the event. Now, we know that COVID-19 has thrown just a wrench in everyone's life. It continues to have a major impact on people. It's changed the way that we all live and work. And then indeed, if you've ever engaged with us in any sort of a webinar before, or if you know anyone that works at the company, we help people get jobs. This is our mission. This is our North Star. And we know that this is truly more important now than ever. But I want to assure you that we have been very, very hard at work on your behalf to innovate during this time. And primarily what we've been doing is helping employers shift all of their hiring practices online so that you still have access to great jobs and conversations with recruiters in a timely fashion. Particularly, this is why we started the virtual hiring tour, which many of you on the call are probably familiar with. Very quickly, this is essentially what we've done. So if you've ever been to an on-site hiring event where there might be multiple recruiters interviewing a variety of different people at one time, we've essentially taken that experience and moved it online. And what's great about it is it's just going to be one-on-one. So it's just you and a given recruiter having a conversation. But we have partnered with hundreds of employers across the country. We're doing it regionally. So we've already completed the Western tour, the Southern tour, and the Midwest tour. But I don't know about you, but in the times that I've interviewed with recruiters in the past, or even just submitted my application anywhere, there's nothing worse than submitting your credentials and then it kind of disappearing into a black hole. And then you have to wait like weeks or sometimes months to even get a response back or anything like that. This virtual hiring tour is meant to cut out all of that middle time, trim the fat, and allow you to get right in front of a recruiter and have that conversation initially so that you don't have to worry about any of that wait time. So we're trying to make it a little bit easier for you. If you haven't signed up yet, you can see the link on the screen here. Highly encourage you to do so, entirely free. Now, let's talk about interview prep, because even though these conversations are virtual, we still need to make sure that we're adequately preparing so that we're putting our best foot forward. So I'm going to kind of walk you through some tips that I think are really helpful in terms of preparing for a virtual interview specifically, and then we'll carry it out from there. So the first thing that I want you to do, and I know that this sounds implied, but I want you to go back to the event page. I want you to reread the job description and all those event details at least 2 or 3 more times. And the reason for this is because when you get to this event page, so of course the job description is going to be there, and you want to make sure that you understand the entirety of what the employer is asking of you as a potential candidate for the role. But this event page is going to also host a slew of other great pieces of information. Notably, if, let's say, for example, there's a certification that is required for the role, you may need to bring that with you. The event details page is going to list that out. They're going to let you know if this is perhaps the first conversation in a series of other conversations, if there's any other materials that you may need to bring with you. And then notably, oftentimes they will include dress code attire information. So if you ever are wondering, what should I wear to this interview? Oftentimes it's going to be there for you. But we're going to go into a little bit greater detail as to what you can do to prepare for that if they don't give you that information. The second thing that I want to recommend is to do your homework. There's nothing more impressive to a recruiter than when you can come to the table and speak fluently to their business. Minor things like even understanding what their culture and values are. If they have a values statement or a mission statement, just familiarize yourself with that, because if you can align your own values with their values, it's going to automatically seem like a symbiotic match. So if you are looking to do your research, there's a couple of places that I think would be great for you to go to. Of course, on Indeed. So if you found a job listing, right, that speaks to you, the name of the company is going to be hyperlinked. And then there you can go into their Indeed company page and you can read things like reviews. There's a Q&A portion as well. But within reviews specifically, you can actually filter the exact title and location of the type of role that you're going for. So if you really want to get a good feel for what other people have experienced in that role, it would be a great place to do that. I think Glassdoor is going to be another great place for you to go as well. For those of you who don't know, Glassdoor is now our sister company. Our parent owns now Indeed and Glassdoor, so feel free to use both of those places to familiarize yourself with culture and values. And then you also want to make sure that you're visiting their corporate career site, just in case there's any additional information there that maybe they didn't carry over. But that should pretty much cover you in terms of prep. Now, I also want to make sure that you are tailoring your resume to the actual job that you're going for. So a couple of things here that I always recommend to job seekers that I'm assisting through this process. On your resume, I always want to make sure that people have an objective statement. It's a one sentence kind of, hey, this is who I am. This is maybe what I'm looking to accomplish in this role, so that it sets the tone for the rest of the doc. I find that to be great. Sets a good, first impression, because recruiters, as a secret, recruiters spend about 5 to 8 seconds kind of glancing over a resume to determine whether or not they want to continue reading it. So give them something really compelling up front for them to then be able to read the rest of the document. But a great rule of thumb that I can offer for you is, if you're really wanting to make sure that your resume speaks to that role itself, what I would encourage you to do is go through that job description and extract keywords that you can then use inside of your actual resume itself. So that way, when a recruiter has the job description open and then your resume next to them, they're going to see similar keywords and think to themselves, oh, that makes sense to me. So if you're just looking for, like I said, a way to kind of tailor and personalize that document to make sure that you are just really on top of their mind, great way to do that. Now let's talk about practice, because practice makes perfect. It's a great way for you to be able to make sure that you come to the table in an articulate fashion, that you feel confident in what you're talking about. But these are some things you can do to make sure that it goes smoothly. So the first thing that I want you to consider is to work on your pitch. So think about a 1 minute pitch that you could, an elevator pitch, if you will, about who you are as a professional, what your career goals are, and really, more importantly, how those are relevant to the actual role and the company itself. If you're looking for some inspiration in terms of how to kind of construct this, 1 minute pitch, some questions that you might be able to ask yourself are something as simple as, are you better at data and crunching numbers, or are you more creative? Do you have really good customer service experience? Can you maybe think of a quick story of how you've helped a customer in the past, or maybe you've worked on a project that you're really proud of that you can use to kind of tee up, what it is that you believe in and the type of work that you've embarked upon? That's going to be a great way to ease in the conversation and make it feel really natural. Use your resume as a guide. So always keep a copy of your resume either up on your desktop next to you, or actually print it out next to your computer, so that if the recruiter does come back and they want to, have you elaborate maybe on a project that you worked on, an accomplishment, or if you have any sort of numbers or dollars associated with it, it's just going to be very easy to glance down and remember those numbers and speak to them clearly without having to shuffle through and remember what they are. I always think that that's helpful. And then what I want you to do is prepare at least one question. Now, I want you to keep in mind that these virtual interviews, they're typically a little bit more condensed in nature, so we don't have as much time to have a conversation. But if you can come to the table with a specific question that you've initiated for the recruiter, it really does indicate that you've done your homework, and then it invites more of a conversational tone. A couple of examples of questions that I personally love. For example, could you describe the working culture of your company? Or how does the company measure success in this role? I think being able to ask specific questions about measurement is a great way for you to indicate to the recruiter that you are thinking very strategically in ways that you can deliver in the role and then quantify your results. If you can quantify your projected results, in even something like a 30, a 60, and 90-day plan, even if it's very rough, your recruiter is going to be very impressed with that. And then finally, test your tech. We're going to dive into this in a little bit greater detail, but at bare minimum, just make sure that that mic, your camera, and your internet connection are working. It seems like something that you would expect it to just happen, but it's always when we need to be live and kind of presenting that we run into tech issues. So make sure that those are buttoned up ahead of time, which this is going to lead us directly into how you can feel very successful during the call itself. So we are going to continue to post things in the chat here for you, additional articles with some tips and tricks that will be helpful. But let me just walk you through some of my favorite best practices. Again, don't feel like you need to write all these down because you're going to get a copy of this later. But these are just some general guidance that I find to be very helpful. If you are living in a house with other people, which a lot of us are doing right now because we're quarantined at home, the best thing you can do is just make it vibrantly clear to everyone that you are to be undisturbed during the allotted time of your interview. Something that I could recommend is pad that time with 15 minutes before and 15 minutes afterwards. So you got that time beforehand to prep, and you have those last 15 minutes to kind of collect your thoughts and tie everything up. Now, if you're worried about someone walking in, and it totally happens, perhaps face the door so that if someone does walk in, you can non-verbally communicate like, hey, I am not free right now. And it also allows the camera to not catch them if they do walk in. So if that is something that, maybe you've got kids that are unaware that you're on an important call, maybe just position yourself in that way to make it a little bit easier to manage if it does happen. I want you to also adjust the lighting. So what I typically tend to do is if I have the ability to work in a room where I have a window, I like to sit in front of the window because that natural light does actually wonders for your face. Man, I feel like I'm always someone who looks tired on screen. So when you sit in front of natural light, it really helps. Or if in this case, for example, I'm traveling right now, I'm actually in a hotel. So I'm in a very, very dark business center room. So what I did is I bought a little ring light. It just clips onto my laptop. It was like 18 bucks on Amazon. And it at least projects a little bit more light onto my face so that you can see me. So particularly in an interview setting, it just helps the recruiter be able to have a better sense of who you are. And it just makes the conversation a little bit more enjoyable for everyone. If you can keep your space organized, the best advice I ever got was organize space, organize mind. Even if the person that you're talking to on video can't see, right, your desk or the table that you're sitting at, psychologically, there are actually studies that show that if you have a clean space around you, or if you've made your bed in the morning, or even tidied up the kitchen ahead of time, I know it sounds like it shouldn't be relevant, but when we're in a tidier headspace, we typically perform in a greater capacity and we present with greater confidence. So give that a try if you haven't yet. I have found that it works really well for me, and it's something that I do every time I present virtually in front of my computer. We talked about having a copy of your resume available to you. And then, of course, have a glass of water nearby. We tend to, when we get nervous and we are wanting to make a really good impression, our body plays total tricks on us. And the number one thing that typically happens is we get dry mouth. So have a glass of water nearby. We're all human beings. Feel free to take a sip of it when you need to, particularly if maybe you get a challenging question. Take a sip of water and use that time to then prepare what you want to say. Okay. Now we talked about tech. So tech, like I said, is great until it's not. But again, being human beings and tech is imperfect. What I could encourage you to do, in addition to checking those webcams and mics like we talked about, But what I would encourage you to do, we just talked about having an organized space around you. I would challenge you to carry that over to a virtual environment as well. So maybe cleaning up that desktop, or maybe some of the tabs or bookmarks that you might have on there. If for any reason maybe you needed to share your screen during an interview to showcase a project or something like that, it's always just a really good impression to kind of indirectly show that you're even organized digitally. I certainly know that I've paid attention to that for people that I've interviewed in the past, and it just makes a nice impression out the gate. Now, if you're someone like me as well, I live and die by my computer, so I'm using it for email, I'm using it for Slack, I'm using it for news notifications, and let's be honest, there's a lot of them right now. Make sure that you go in and put Do Not Disturb on your computer. If you have email notifications coming in, just set those to silent until you're off, just so that you're not disturbed whatsoever, because it happens, and the last thing I want you to do is get distracted during your conversation. And then make sure that the internet connection is strong. The best thing that you can do is just make sure that you're not, downloading anything else in the background. So just keep the bandwidth as clean and open as possible. Put your phone on silent if possible. If you're really not going to be needing your phone, honestly, turn it over and set it maybe on the other side of the table. Even if you are not intending to engage with your phone, but let's say you're trying to make a really compelling point in an interview, and then your phone lights up or someone's texting you 100 times, just let's just like put that aside, and then that way it's not a distraction whatsoever. Now, when we talk about interviewing itself, so there's a couple of different platforms that you may be using, but I wanted to just take a quick minute to walk through Indeed's new video interviewing platform, conveniently called VIP, so that way you just have a really good sense of how it works, and that way you have at least a base understanding of the way in which you're going to progress through it when you're using it. So let me just take a couple of quick seconds here. I'm going to walk you through kind of the cadence of it here. So the day before your interview, from us specifically, you're going to receive an email and a text. Each of those communications is going to have a link that's going to route you directly into VIP itself. Now, we designed this in a way that works well on a mobile device. It works really well on a computer. So choose whichever device you feel more comfortable with. It'll automatically route you into your browser. But then once you're on the check-in screen, you're going to see a custom welcome message from the employer, and then you're going to be prompted to get in line. Now, from there, you're going to see a pop-up asking for your phone number, and this is going to be used to text you to let you know when it's time for your interview, so that way you don't have to just sit there at your screen just arbitrarily waiting. We're going to let you know when it's time. Now, from there, you're going to be able to see how many people are in line ahead of you, which I find really helpful, because that way it kind of just sets a time precedent, and you kind of know how much time you have to collect your thoughts before you actually begin your conversation. Now, interestingly, what's cool is that when it's your time to be interviewed, you're going to see a timer on the screen, which means you've got about 5 minutes to actually join the chat. But this is very important, because if you don't join in that amount of time, then you're going to get moved to the back of the line. And we just want to make sure that we're protecting the time that you have set aside with your recruiter. But then when you're ready, all you need to do is just click join interview, and then you're going to get automatically placed into the room. Now, something that we've done intentionally that I have found to be just very helpful is that you will always be the first one to enter. So you'll be in there before the actual recruiter does. So if there's anything last minute that you need to adjust with lighting or with the way in which you're positioned in front of the camera, you have a couple of extra seconds to do that. But from there, honestly, the rest of the platform, I mean, it's kind of similar to Zoom and to FaceTime. So all those controls like, muting yourself, stopping the video, good to go. That's going to all feel very, very normal. Now, if you're using Zoom, which is totally cool, I mean, we're using it now. I use Zoom multiple times a day. The only thing I would encourage you to do here is to just make sure that all of those details for the actual interview are just in your personal calendar, so that you don't get dates and times mixed up. Make sure that you have the Zoom app downloaded, your account's created, so that way you are good to go. You just have to join a couple of minutes early, and then boom, you should be all set. Now, when we think of setting the stage, and we're thinking about the way that you can come to the table just really, really tight, everything is good to go. Dressing professionally is very important. The goal is to dress as close to the culture of the company as possible. I know that can be a little bit harder to do now because we're all virtual. But what I would encourage you to do, solid colors is usually really good, but honestly, guys, I just stick to something like smart casual, button down, maybe a blazer, a nice pair of jeans, right? Blouse, whatever it is that you would wear to a networking event, or perhaps like a work dinner. I just think that that is the best way to go, because it's kind of right in the middle of the road, and it's a little universal. So do that. Again, lighting is very important. Get that adjusted, and then center yourself in the middle of the screen. Sometimes the window pops over to the right. I center mine directly below my camera so that I at least have a direct line of sight so that it feels as natural as possible when I'm communicating with my recruiter. Now, body language. So I am very big on nonverbal communication. If you've been watching, any sort of news debate lately, you'll know that this is has been loud and widely used. But body language is great because what it does is it shows active engagement, even if you're not speaking. So I also am a big believer that when you're in this conversation, understanding that your recruiters are going to be talking to a lot of different people in one time, showing good energy is like completely within your realm. So you have complete control over the tone of this conversation. Sitting up straight really helps with that. Nodding, of course, right when you're engaging, I think shows that you are actively participating. But outside of that, try to just be as natural as possible as if you would when you were in a closed space. I am a big hand gesture. You can probably tell. If that helps you communicate more clearly, that's great. Just make sure that it's not so overwhelming that it's distracting and knocking things over, because you just don't want the recruiter to be focusing on that, right, and not your head movements. But in terms of maximizing your wait time, right, make sure that you RSVP in advance. And if you are someone that does tend to get nervous before interviews, something that I have really started to do, which helps a lot, is breathing exercises. Calm is a great app. Headspace is another good one. But you would be surprised if, like I said, if you do tend to get a little, trepidatious before, an interview, take a couple of minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes to just do a little bit of a breathing exercise. It really will like calm you down and allow you to collect your thoughts. So give that a try if it's something that you haven't before, and especially if you tend to talk really fast, helps with that too. And then practice all of those pitches ahead of time so that you feel like you can speak to them fluently. Now we talked about, right, things can go wrong with when you're using tech, and that's totally okay. Things happen. What I would encourage you to do though is just be human about it and use your tools right within your video interviewing platform to just politely excuse yourself. So if you need to, maybe mute yourself and excuse yourself from the conversation quickly to rectify or move on, that's okay. Provide your phone number ahead of time so that you can let the recruiter know you're happy to reconnect via phone or to reschedule if that does pop up. But listen, noise interruptions happen. I live in the city, so I've got leaf blowers and construction and ambulances like happening outside of my window. It's totally okay to just politely excuse those noises, or maybe when you're not talking, just keep yourself on mute to kind of mitigate it as much as possible. If someone does enter the room, though, what I would encourage you to do is not just mute yourself, but maybe take yourself off video and let your recruiter know that you need to just have, maybe a minute to, to collect yourself and tidy everything up, handle the interruption. What's great about this is even if this does happen, the way in which you manage it is going to be a great way for you to showcase to your recruiter, right, that you have composure, and you can handle a situation on the fly if it's if the disruption happens. So actually use it to your advantage. And then finally, you want to make sure that you send a nice follow-up email within 24 hours is ideal, thanking them for their time. But what I always recommend, if you can pinpoint something in the conversation that was specific or unique to just you and your recruiter, maybe you talked about where you went to school, maybe you shared a fun story that got a laugh, refer back to that in your notes so that they can remember you clearly. All right. So I know that we went through a lot of content in a short period of time, but I do want to make sure that we have time for Q&A. So we have about 5 minutes left. So I'm going to have Dawn hop in here and ask and reads out some of the questions that we got during the webinar. I'll do my best to answer them for you, and then I'll take us home in the next couple of minutes. So Dawn, what kind of questions came through that we can answer for our folks?
Perfect. Well, thanks, Taylor. Let me go ahead and scroll into our first question. It says, what is the best practice for creating eye contact? Should one look into the webcam rather than at the speaker's image on screen? Great question.
That is a really good question. So if you recall, I mentioned to move the window directly in front of the camera itself. So if you do that, the way that the way that manufacturers have designed these webcams is that if the actual person, if their face is right below that webcam, even if you're looking directly at them and not the webcam itself, it's still going to create the effect that you're looking directly at them. I know that when you are looking directly into the actual camera lens itself, it can kind of feel impersonal. So if you just shift everything quite literally to the center of the screen so that your face is directly in line with theirs, then it's going to appear that you're talking directly at them without having to stare directly down the barrel of the actual lens itself.
Right. Yeah, and I agree, Taylor. Like body language, like you mentioned earlier, is key, and a smile and eye contact shows confidence. And I think that was another question I've seen a lot on our community page. But how you evoke that confidence and that eye contact is very important. So perfect. Here's our next question. What can interviewers expect on a virtual mixer? How do you ensure collaboration in a virtual context?
So in terms of collaboration, so well, this is what I want you to know. When in this case, I know that in some hiring event situations, you are in a group of people where you're interviewing. Specifically for virtual interviewing, you are only going to be one to one with a recruiter. So it's just going to be you, the job seeker, and the recruiter. So this is not going to be group interviewing. So don't worry about that necessarily. But if you are joining maybe a separate type of a conversation where they are inviting you to a virtual mixer, what I always encourage you to do is make sure that your video is on and actively participate in a chat panel. So it can be very difficult, especially if you've got like a group of people right on one screen. It kind of looks like a Brady Bunch type of a situation. I always say, communicate. If someone's asking a question, communicate in that chat panel so that everyone can kind of see. And then if you do have a specific question that you want to ask and you submit that, maybe put your name or your initials next to it so that the person who is reading out those questions then can then refer you directly and then give you a time to speak without having to, talk over everybody else. That's what I would recommend.
Perfect. Great advice, Taylor. Here's the next question. Is it okay to have notes and refer to them during a video interview?
Oh, yes, totally. Actually, I recommend it. This is the way that I try to describe this. At least I was helping a friend prep for an interview, and I was like, you're not memorizing a movie script here. So if you have notes that are maybe just points to jot down, of relevant stories that you want to tell, or maybe you want to make sure you hit on a project, that's great. You don't need to write everything out verbatim. What I typically tend to do is just have an outline. That way I kind of have just specific points of what I want to talk about. But I got great advice. I remember from an old director of mine who said, if you can just maybe pinpoint 3 stories of previous work experiences that you're really proud of, again, be it a customer service experience that you facilitated, how you you overcame an objection, an accomplishment, whatever that might be. That way, if whatever question you do get asked in an interview, typically those stories are universal and you can apply them to multiple different questions. So instead of trying to memorize the answers to every single prep question that you may get, having those stories will allow you to speak authentically, and it'll cover a lot of ground for you.
Perfect. And so to add to that, I remember I used notes a few times too, and it made me feel more comfortable and confident. And I ended up not using them anyways, but just having them there just made me feel comfortable. So whatever makes you feel good. All right, next question. And I know we're running a little short on time, so I'll probably ask 2 more questions. And then again, you can leverage our community board as well. Okay. So here's the next question. Should we use virtual backgrounds?
Yes. So I would say it depends. Depending on the clarity of the background, I always like to test the ones that I'm using first, because sometimes they get a little grainy. But honestly, yeah, it's totally fine. If you don't feel comfortable with people seeing your background, I would think that that's totally fine. I typically like to have some sort of a home background, but if you actually just go to Google and type in professional Zoom backgrounds, now they've got a variety of different offices and things like that you can choose from, but just make sure that your face is clear and illuminated with that light that I was talking about. And then other than that, you should be good to go.
Perfect. And I'll make this our last one because we're based on time. And this is a question I saw quite frequently on our community board. So what is your advice to the skilled older worker that now has to not only maneuver the IT process of virtual interviewing and hiring, but how to show that we are still skilled for the position now that we're outside of our comfort zone?
Yeah. Oh, wow. I really respect this question, and here's why.
Hmm.
So, if you do identify as someone who, right, is older, who has, had a lot of experience, your experience is highly valuable, and you can teach a lot of people a lot of things. So, even though you are right, maybe newer to a virtual interviewing platform, and it can seem a little bit scary at first, I want you to feel very confident in knowing that the experiences you've had in the past are really going to speak very, very well to processes that are happening now. So even though technology has evolved quite a bit and the way teams are structured, I don't want anyone ever to feel that their experience doesn't matter just because you might be from a different generation. Some of the most influential people that I have worked with have been significantly older than me and actually significantly younger than me. So I would encourage you to be open-minded and ask questions. It's okay that you don't know all the answers to all these new tech nuances, but if you can come into it with a light heart and a little bit of a sense of humor, and this is true for anyone. If you whatever process you're uncomfortable with, right? Making light of it and just exuding humanity with it, I think is the best route to go.
Right. And I'd like to piggyback off of this. This is actually a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I am the one of the IRG leaders for AGE, which is Indeed's group that touches upon this topic. And just to kind of do a quick plug, on October 27th, we are having a Jobcast topic on avoiding ageism. And it'll talk about some tips for mature workers. So please check that out for those people who are interested in this topic. Okay. And with that, Taylor, why don't you take it away?
Well, thank you, Don. Thank you for everyone joining. If you found this helpful, check out other Jobcasts that we have. You can go to goindeed.com/Jobcast, a series of different free workshops there available for you as well. And other than that, I just want to wish you the best of luck. If you, like I said, if you want to follow along with us, or if you have additional questions, or you just want to ask a question, again, you can find Indeed on Instagram at Indeed Works, or you can find me personally on Instagram at Tailor Presents. I actually just started this Instagram account last week, so I'm still in the process of getting new content up there. My mother was my first follower. She seemed to approve, but that's the place where if you do have ongoing questions and you want to DM me directly, I would be happy to make myself available for you as well. And then LinkedIn is always an option too. So thank you again for joining, and best of luck in your job search and in your interviews. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.